What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And before I introduce the guest host, which is a complete change of pace for the show, my friend John Kane, I want to first dedicate a show, as I always do. I want to dedicate the show today to friends. I tell people all the time, throughout your life, you're going to have 5 people that you will call if you need to dig a hole to bury a body. 5 in your whole lifetime. You're going to have a lot of people you know. You're going to have a lot of people that you hang out with and you associate with and that you'll call to have a beer. But you're only going to have 5 people that you would call to dig a hole. And they're not going to ask any questions. John Kane's one of those guys that'll dig a hole for me. And I would dig a hole for him. And that's why he's hosting the show tonight. And I think friendship is the backbone to successful living. Without friends, without people you can count on, without having those people that are in your foxhole, life can become very, very sad and very, very shallow. And I'm thankful for all my friends, all my 5. They know who they are. And I'm thankful for you, John. The podcast, you can hear it everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, you name it. You can hear it on that platform. A little bit about John. John is the vice president of Vector Marketing. He is, I don't know, anybody ever hear of Cutco? It's like the largest knife company in the world. Everybody knows Cutco. If you came out of college, you probably got asked to be a sales guy if you were a sales guy in college to come work for Cutco. And John is just an amazing business guy, amazing mind. A little bit of how we met. John's brother is friends and business partners with my business partner, Jason. And his brother knew that I was trying to become a speaker and that I needed to get some access to the world that I knew nothing about. And John just happens to be friends with many powerful, well-known people in the inspirational speaking world, which is where I was heading into. So we set up a meeting for John and I, and we met at Maggiano's in King of Prussia. And afterwards, we figured this out, but we both were planning on about a 15-minute meeting. And not because of anything other than we didn't know whether or not there was going to be a fit or our personalities were going to work. Long story short, we spent, 3-4 hours together that night. And we really connected. And from that moment on, we just really became quickly very good friends. And he became a mentor of mine and somebody I go to for advice, and I believe I served that same role for him, and that's why he's hosting this show tonight. So without further ado, my good friend John Kane. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, Matt, and I'm even better now because since being on the podcast tonight, I got promoted to vice president, which I'm pretty fired up about.
Awesome. Well, I got that power.
For all the Cutco people out there, I'm still the director of sales, but Matt has high hopes for me and is thinking big things, and that's why I'm in the top 5. That's why he's in the top 5. That's good stuff.
Everybody needs a new title. Let's listen. Sometimes the bottom of your emails need to get spiced up, and I think vice president makes you look better.
You're fun, and this is fun. It's an honor to be here. But tonight's not about me, Matt. It's about you, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to spend some time with you. I will share very simply that your work has had a profound impact on my life and my heart in a short period of time. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit about that tonight. But I want to really just start, and for the people who have been tuning in and downloading your podcast at record amazing rates. I think it's fascinating because you're shining a light on so many people, so many amazing people. The diversity of guests that you've had has been really fun to watch, fascinating, and you have some really great. You've had some really great guests, and love the style of the podcast. It's been a lot of fun, and anybody that's tuned in has really enjoyed it. So it's really an honor to be here. But I think a lot of people are tuning in tonight because just like me, they are interested in getting to know you a little bit better. And so, turning it right back at you, who is Matt Cubbler?
All right. So I'll lead with, this has been one of those days that I've never done a live show. I mean, I've shared this story on stage many times, and I've done many podcasts where I've shared parts of my story.
Mm-hmm.
They've all been pre-recorded, and it's a lot easier when you know it's not instantaneously being received by another person. So this one I'm a little bit nervous about tonight, but I'm going to just sort of let it all go and figure out how to make the show work as a guest. So who is Matt Cubbler? Matt Cubbler is, depending on who you ask, but I believe I am first and foremost a servant. When I've been asked something similar to this question several different times in different podcasts, and it always comes back to when I'm trying to think of a word that describes me. Ever since I was a kid, I've been serving others, and I'm a servant, and that's really, I'm a servant to my community. I'm a servant to my country. I'm a servant to my family. I'm a servant to my God. I'm a servant to my friends, and I just believe that that's who I am as a person. I'm meant to be there for other people, and that's why I created the I Got You speaking brand. And it's when we talked about that, you and I, and we came up with the I Got You and the living a life of selfless service worthy of remembrance. It literally encapsulated who I am. I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered as a person who meant something, who was a servant leader, who always was there when somebody needed him and had their back, regardless of the situation or the need, that I was always there. So I believe that I am, at my core, a servant.
I mean, there's a lot there, Matt, and we're going to get into all of it. I'm going to jump right in because when we met at Maggiano's that night, I was impressed by your passion, your direct approach to things. Anybody that knows you probably appreciates that. We just met for the first time, but we were able to go deep very quickly. There wasn't a lot of small talk. It was, you shared a little bit about who you were. And I left that night. I remember handing you a book and you said you would send me your book. And I'm going to take the podcast right home tonight because we had a great meeting that night. But what happened the next couple days, over a couple weeks, you got a few phone calls from me. My morning routine is to read in the morning. And I have a couple of friends for my 25th anniversary with Cutco. They bought me a sauna. It's not something I would have ever bought for myself. And it's in the basement, and I spend the morning reading. I spent the better part of 2.5 weeks crying in my sauna, just weeping tears of a lot of different emotions. But what you and I have in common is that we both lost a brother, and under tragic circumstances. And I know that reading the story of your relationship with your brother, Andy, and how that impacted your life and the things that you're doing now, in my mind, it's just such a big part of who you are. And can you tell us about Andy tonight, about your relationship with Andy as a brother? I know that the book is there, but for people that haven't read it, but as you think about Andy and that relationship, can you share a little bit about growing up in Pottstown and just some of the dynamics there? I think in getting to know you, if I felt like after reading just 2 or 3 chapters of that book, I really could feel your heart and soul coming through. And if people haven't read the book, fasten your seatbelt. It'll wake you up. We've all lost people. We've all lost, many of us have lost, people close to us. And I want to thank you, Matt, because even though my brother passed 10 years ago, your book really helped me in my grieving process. It helped me realize that part of me was disconnected. And it was you actually had me turn back toward some of those things, which I hadn't done. And your book gave me the courage to do that. And that's why I wanted to be here tonight. And I wanted to talk to you, not because I have no desire to be a podcast host, but I felt it would be an honor to be able to ask you about, just dig a little bit deeper into your childhood, the stories of Andy, and just for people who don't know, can you share some of that tonight?
I'd love to. I've talked in pieces throughout the podcast, depending on the guest and the way the conversation goes, about some of my past, but I've never really done a deep dive into Andy. And the amazing thing about my brother was that no matter how hard life got, no matter what struggles he had to overcome, whether it was autism, whether it was an ungodly stutter that his eyes would roll in his head, his face would contort, his body would contort, that no matter what was going on, the failing grades and repeating 2 grades and never really graduating, he never had an impure thought in his life. His life was just simply love and wanting to be accepted and wanting to accept others. God was a gigantic part of his life. I mean, he can memorize the Bible, but couldn't tell me how many pennies were in a dollar. My brother was just pure, and everybody, the thing that I struggle with is that when you bring somebody into the world who has all the issues that my brother had, and you only let him live 21 years, like his only thing that I wanted for my brother was for him to see his glory, to see all the struggle come out the other side and just have him become the man that I knew that he wanted to become, that he could be. And he died and he was taken from me. And I never got to understand that. And I used to ask why all the time. And I realized that why is never an answer that's going to come to me. And when you get a chance to go back and relive your life, as I did when I wrote the book, you get to remember all the amazingness that my brother had in his life. And I talked with somebody, Tim Rode, from One Life Fully Lived yesterday, and we talked about Andy. And the thing that I used this in a talk because it just came to me that, when Andy died, a piece of me died, actually a very big piece of me died. And I spent 13 years angry and pissed off at God and pissed off at myself and survivor's guilt. And I shut myself off from anything positive or good in my life. And I sort of went on autopilot. And when Andy died, I remembered like 1,000 people in the church at his funeral. And I distinctly remember asking myself, who the hell are all these people? Because people don't understand. When I grew up with Andy, I was his best friend. I was his only friend. We never had anybody call our house and say, can Andy come out and play? We never had Andy get invited to a birthday party. He never had a sleepover. He never got invited to a sleepover. The only thing I knew about my brother is that he needed me and I was his protector. And I provided him with the friends that were my friends and people that looked out for him. And that's the world that I knew with my brother. And when he was 16 years old, he went to go work at a camp called Camp Nava, which is out in Chester County. And it's a Christian camp, and a family friend of ours ran the camp and invited Andy to become a volunteer member to staff, do grass cutting and things of that nature. And every year he would go away in the summer, come home occasionally, but mostly he spent pretty much every day at the camp and slept there. But I never went there. I never went to the camp other than to go pick him up and to see him. But I never really experienced that camp life or what he was doing there. So for 4 years, my brother left and came home a different person. And I did notice that every year he came back, he was a little bit more confident. He still had the autistic issues. He still had the stuttering, but he just seemed more confident. And the day that he died, I didn't know that the person that my brother had become was the person I didn't know. The person I knew needed me. The person I knew needed me to be there for him every single day. But the person he had become was this confident, amazing human being that touched so many lives, because those people that came that day to his funeral were all people that he met through Camp Nava. And I didn't know that person. I didn't know that part of my brother. And thankfully, I didn't know this until many years later, that those people were all from Camp Nava. That 13-year period that I went through where I didn't love myself and I didn't love anyone else. Had I known that my brother had grown into this amazing human being and had touched all these people and had all these relationships with other people, and I never got to know that person, I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd have known that at that time. And it wasn't until I wrote the book and I had people come to the book signings that I was having when I first wrote it. There was all these people that were at the church that day came to get a copy of the book because they wanted something tangible of my brother. And they would share stories with me about how they named their children after my brother, and they built a gymnasium and named it after my brother. Like all these amazing things that my brother did in their lives were now revealed to me. And I was just like, holy shit, my brother lived his life. I was so angry for so long at God for taking him before I thought he had lived, when in fact he actually lived his life. And that's one of the greatest gifts I got after I wrote the book, but it's also one of the things that hurts me the most, because I didn't get to know him. And that hurts.
Yeah.
Because he was special. And I wished I knew that person. So that's the hardest part through this whole thing. And I think part of why I'm so driven to share his story is because instead of being hurt by not knowing that person, I am empowered to take what I believe was his gift, which was to connect and to share his heart and to be kind and to be willing to put himself out with all his vulnerabilities, with his stutter, with his learning disabilities, with his awkwardness socially. He was willing to put that all out there without any fear. So if that was who my brother really was, and that's who he became, and I didn't really get a chance to see that person, I can now know that person through other people's stories and then share the gift of my book and their stories and my memories with other people, so that Andy's gift of connecting and kindness and authenticity can be shared with the world.
You know, Matt, I have a couple responses or reactions. You know, when I asked you earlier, who is Matt? One of the things I would share that I've learned in such a period of time is that you truly understand what brotherhood means. And, you know, having a chance to read some of the stories in the book about how you were your brother's protector, you know, literally you were always looking out for him. You know, I never said this to you, but I can't help but, you know, the thing I wanted to say to you and want to say to you is it's so easy to underestimate the seeds that were planted at a young age in Andy's heart. The fact that he always felt safe, the fact that he always had you looking over him. And, you know, while it may have been true that you didn't have the opportunity to see him blossoming, he was kind of blossoming at the camp on his own, and you got to see that later. You know, anyone looking at this from the outside, you know, maybe with a step back would say, you know, you gave him a platform along with, you know, love from some other family members, but you really gave him a platform that he could really grow from. And he knew he knew you were there. And, you know, I think sometimes in many of us in relationships, we don't realize that our words and actions are seeds that are planted in the lives of other people. And what I see in you today is I see how you've gone through a lot, and we're going to talk a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit about the period after you lost Andy, and because I think that's powerful for a lot of people, what some of the things that you went through. But I think it's easy to take for granted sometimes that we don't immediately see the result of the things that we do. I think it's a great lesson in your life. You spent years and years and you didn't see the result. When Andy passed tragically in a car accident, you felt guilty, sad, angry, many different emotions. And I think it would be true to say that you've acknowledged that you essentially spent the next 10 to 12 years signing up for every dangerous assignment, mission, thing, you know, running into the fray. Whenever stuff was going down, you were the first one in. And you have shared that a part of that was that you felt guilt about being the one left behind and that Andy wasn't here. And, essentially not consciously, but maybe subconsciously, we're dealing with that grief by putting yourself in harm's way, all in the name of serving our country, serving, your comrades in the army, and many of the different iterations of your service career. But you mentioned that, a lot of years were spent where anger and guilt and hurt were driving the bus. And can you share with people, there are a lot of people out there that are angry about things. They're ashamed of things. They're hurt. They feel guilt. And it's not uncommon for those emotions to be driving the bus for a lot of people at different times in their life. Can you talk about that period? We may come back to a few Andy stories. There's so many that are, I think, fun to reflect on. But can you reflect on that time in your, late teens, early 20s? What was going on with you? What happened? Kind of that period of time, and and just talking about becoming a family guy a little bit. Just share some things and some stories from those times, because I think if people want to know you, they need to know that part, because not everyone's going to read the book, Matt. I'd love to think everybody would, but the way the world is today, people want to watch videos. And so that's what we got. So spend a little time there.
So unfortunately, after Andy died, I left for the Army a month after. So I didn't really have a grieving period. And all I was doing for that month after he died was trying to numb the pain and trying to avoid the constant the flow of people coming in and just reliving and crying and all that. I had to go away. And thankfully I went in the Army. But that also limited my ability to manage my grief. And so I jumped right into the military, and the military doesn't give you a whole lot of time to think. They're thinking for you. And it was at the time, a much needed break from what I was feeling. And, I wouldn't have known that I had PTSD until PTSD was a thing. But looking back on it and thinking about what PTSD, which is simply trauma that the brain can't cope with, I wasn't prepared to lose my brother. I'd spent my entire life planning how I was going to get married and he was going to live with me. And I wasn't ready to handle that. And so I buried it, and I buried it with many things. Alcohol. I buried it with, I was eating myself alive inside. I was taking aspirin like they were Tic Tacs, and I was just acting out in ways that was unhealthy for me. And, for 13 years I did that. And, if you went in the Army, I served well, I served honorably. I did a lot of really good things, but I did it on pure anger and drive to just not feel anything real. I got out of the Army, became a cop. And the first thing I wanted to do was get into as many foot chases, kicking doors, whatever I had to do. I wanted to get involved in that because I was tempting God. I kept saying to myself, maybe today God will take me. And he never did. And I had a lot of close calls, a lot of opportunities where that could have happened. And then I met the most beautiful girl I've ever met in my life. And in my mind, I loved her. And she was obviously out of my league and way too good to me. And we got married. And I had difficulty figuring out what love is. I had difficulty figuring out how to show her love because I didn't feel anything inside. Like I didn't have love for myself. I didn't know how to love her. I knew how to be a good person. I knew how to be a good husband or a good boyfriend and to protect her and to buy her things. And all. I understood the structural context of being a good person, but I couldn't feel anything inside. And we got pregnant, a month after we got married. And we had a child, and we had Rebecca. And the hardest thing to say is that I couldn't love her. And I couldn't be there in the way that she needed me. I could protect her. I could stay up with her. I could feed her. I could do all the things I was supposed to do, but I couldn't love her. And that hurts the most. I robbed her and Lauren. But Lauren is a saint, and she understands me, and it's different when you're with an adult than it is with a child. And I robbed Becca of a part of her childhood that I can't give her again. So 9/11 happens, and I, of course, apply to become a United States Federal Air Marshal without telling my wife, and I get the job. 900,000 to 1 million people applied for the job, and they took about 4,000, and I was one of them. And Lauren, as she always did, she trusts me, and I said, I need to do this. So I did it, and I left while she was pregnant with our son. And I went to the middle of nowhere, New Mexico for 3.5 months while she was pregnant, raising a 4-year-old. Just another way of me leaving, not dealing with anything. Andrew was born in 2002, September of 2002, a year after, about 10 months after I got the job. And we had family over. And, when you have people over at the house, when you have a baby, they bring gifts, and usually the dads and grandfathers and everybody are in the kitchen or in the living room watching TV, and everyone else is opening gifts and oohing and eyeing over onesies and stuff like that. And my stepfather's mother, my grandmother, Nan, she had brought a gift and asked me to be in the room. And she hands me this box, and in the box is a quilt. And I didn't really look at the quilt. I just saw it was a quilt, and I folded it back up and I gave it back to my grandmother. And she gave me this look that I know very well, which is not to mess around from here on out, because she means business. And she hands it back to me and says, "Please look at it." So I did. And the more I held it and the more I looked at it, the more it became familiar. And the week my brother died, he was staying with my grandparents and going to work. And I was staying with friends, going to work. And my mom and stepdad were on vacation in Delaware. And for whatever reason, and I haven't answered the question because it really doesn't matter, but I don't know why she held on to his clothes for 13 years. I don't know why she didn't give it to me when Becca was born. I don't know why now. But she turned Andy's clothes into that quilt. And the more I looked at it, the more I could feel it, the more that I saw the fabrics. There were his undershirts, his blue paisley bandana, hanky things. My brother was a hanky guy. It's disgusting, but he was a hanky guy. His brown work shirts from Frederick Mennonite Home with his stitched Andy were made into teddy bears. A yellow shirt that my mom, we had matching yellow dress shirts for Easter. One of those shirts was made into it. There's all these clothes that made up this beautiful quilt. And needless to say, that was a very emotional. Once I realized I was holding a piece of my brother for the first time in 13 years, that was very emotional. And I went down to the basement that night after everybody left, and I wrote memories, the most vivid, clear, almost like they were happening again. Like I could see my brother. It was so real as I wrote, and I just kept writing and saving and writing and saving and writing and saving as the memories just kept flooding back into my head. And it was like a dump, an emotional dump. I had not thought about things for a very long time. And that night, with that quilt on my lap, I wrote 26,000 words of memories. And I came up the next morning, and our basement stairs opened up into the kitchen, and the sun comes up through that kitchen window every morning. And it was the first time I saw color in 13 years. I've like noticed color, like vibrant, clear color through the rays of light. And And it was so intense and so intentional. Like I was meant to see every ounce of color. And it's as if everything just sort of just, and it's weird. I wasn't healed. It wasn't, but I felt God's grace that day. Like I felt it was okay to forgive myself and to forgive God and to allow myself to live again, and like inside live, not external live. And that was the beginning of the life I've been on for the last 17 years. And it's been a growth process. It's not been an overnight thing. You know, we talked about everybody wanting things to be instantaneous. And when I wrote the book, you know, it started with those 26,000 words. And over the next, you know, when you're an air marshal, you have a lot of time sitting in airports and on airplanes. And a funny story, that day that I wrote those 26,000 words, I called my mom, who's a retired English teacher. And I said, Mom, I wrote 26,000 words about Andy last night. What do I do? And my mom's response, which was not anything I was expecting, she goes, you write a book. Now, anybody that knows me knows I don't read. I had read one book up until the day that I called my mom with those 26,000 words, and it was Animal Farm in 9th grade. But I can write. My mom gifted me the ability to write. And I had a term paper writing business in high school where I would read the first few pages of every chapter and the synopsis on the front cover and the back dust cover and bullshit the rest. And I got paid to write term papers in high school. So I can write. And I told my mom, I don't know if I can write a book because I haven't read one. So she said, maybe you should start. So I started reading some books while I was in the Air Marshals. And I realized that I could probably do this because I'm not telling a story that's fake. I'm just reliving my life and putting it in paper. And so over the next 2.5 years, I did that. And in 2006, I published the book. And the thing that I learned from 1989 until 2006 is that nothing in my life was singularly on its own. It was all connected. Now, I don't want anybody to ever have to go through 13 years of what I went through internally and mentally. But when you get a chance to relive it and go there and go back to the day you were born and just go through your life and just revisit it all and see how everything just sort of connects, it gives you meaning again. Like it explains everything. It's not this happened to me and it was the worst day of my life and I'm screwed. It was everything just sort of, you could piece the puzzle together. And that was one of the coolest things about writing that book, was just going back and reliving my life with my brother and just seeing how it all just fit. And it wasn't happenstance. And it wasn't just something that happened here or happened there. My brother's death wasn't just his death. That death led to all these other things that have happened since then. And I wrote in the book that every door, the day that I started writing the book, every doorknob that's ever been opened for any doorway, my brother's hand was on first. I believe that. I need a question.
Matt, thanks for sharing. You know, I think it's not uncommon for us to have areas of our life that where we're stuck. And I think, you know, sharing the concept of being stuck in a way for 13 years, I think it's important to talk about it because, you know, sometimes you can be stuck for a short period of time, but it can feel long. You know, when fear, anger, those things are driving the bus, it's really hard to move past it. But I think what's so powerful about this story, when you read the book, I mean, as I thought about my brother Michael, I was able to connect and remember stories growing up. By you sharing your story and your love for Andy, it helped me connect with so many stories and things that I had forgotten about. And I just can't help but think, I love, I'll tell you what I love about you. I know when you start getting into the speaking thing here and some guy got on the phone with you and told you that you need to change your book and rewrite it and change the cover. And I won't repeat your exact response on the air tonight. I'm going to keep it PG here, at least PG-13. But you didn't have a good reaction to that because you didn't write the book to make money. You didn't write the book to become famous. You didn't write the book to be, it wasn't about being a speaker and author. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to really just share the love and help the world to know your brother. Such a pure thing. And because you were willing to lean in and able to kind of lean into some of that pain and hurt and frustration, that love came back out. And I think that's a really powerful message for anyone who's struggling with something. What's the point of a podcast like this? What's the point of people getting on here and sharing their stories? It's because it reveals humanity. And sometimes it's fascinating. Some of the guests you've had on, like they're people that have accomplished these amazing things, but what the thread that runs through it is that there's just a humanity that binds us all. We're all broken. We all need help. We all need each other. And, the reality is it might have been true that you needed Andy more than he needed you. And that might not have even been a concept as you were protecting him from bullies and looking out for him. The fact is that his life has informed your life and the way you're showing up in the world. And that's a tremendous gift. And I can't be the only one who's read your book who has sat sobbing, curled up in a ball on the floor. I came up from the basement one day and the kid said, "Dad, you're really sweating." I said, "I know, I'm crying." So real, so raw. I think one of the things I love about you, Matt, is I love that, that someone wrote in the comments. I don't know who Daniel is, a friend of yours, I'm sure. But Daniel said, "I love your transparency, Matt." It's so refreshing. A world where people are always trying to sell us stuff or take us, everybody's got a box of rocks they're trying to give us or sell to us. And, what I love at the core of your life's mission is to really honor your brother's life and the way you live yours. And it's so powerful. We all lose people. We all get stuck. Can you share a little bit about once you started leaning into some of these things, remembering Andy, writing the pages down, how did that start to impact things at home? Meaning you shared that, you can't give what you don't have, and there were certain things you didn't have to give. And can you talk about the journey from kind of 2002 to today and how, by you being able to kind of lean into that, how that's shown up at home in your marriage and your relationship with your kids? And I also want to make this comment. There can't be a single parent or husband or wife on this podcast who feels like they've done it all perfect. I don't even think, I think we all fall down. We all fail. So I think we all feel really weak in those ways. But I guess my question is, what has happened? What light, you saw the color that day, but how did that light come into your life in terms of your relationship with your family and your wife?
Well, great question. I'll lead with, I've always wanted to be good in everything I do. Like, I try to be a good person. I try to do the right thing. That's kind of how I'm wired. And when I realized, when I was during the broken period, when I was those 13 years, I married Lauren in 1994. So I had 8 years. I met Lauren in 1994, married in 1997. So I had 8 years with my girlfriend and then wife, where I was doing good things and I was trying to do good, but I wasn't connecting on the way that I needed to connect. It put a strain on our marriage, and we got pregnant right after we got married. So it wasn't like we had a whole lot of honeymoon time, but having a child that was premature and having my own struggles with loving my wife, and then add on not being able to love my daughter, and then knowing that I was broken. I mean, this wasn't something where I was like, ooh, I'm good. And then 13 years later, I figured out I was broken. I knew the whole time I was a mess. And I tried to get out of it. I knew why I was a mess. I just didn't know how to get out of it. And I didn't know how to explain that to my wife. And I certainly didn't know how to explain it to a child. And I just tried to work through it. And I would grasp onto things, that tangible things, like how did I express love and how did I feel love, was more physical than it was emotional. And when that was missing, I felt like I was out, like there was no love. If we didn't have that going on, then things were bad. And in my mind, and I couldn't work through that. And, I couldn't, when you have a newborn who's, colicky and she's 5 weeks premature, and I didn't want to change her diaper. She was 5 pounds. I thought I'd snap a leg. And so I didn't know how to receive love from my daughter, or I didn't know how to express love to my daughter. And it was this whole complicated situation. And it was hard because I couldn't get out of that. And I want to make that very clear. I knew I was broken, but I couldn't get out. And fast forward to 2002 and having another son. And for the record, I didn't want another child. Lauren knows what I need. She has always known what I need. It's her gift. And she told me we needed to have another child. And we had Andrew. And Andrew didn't save my life. But what followed Andrew's birth saved my life. And once you have that moment where you feel as if, the brokenness is starting to heal and that there's a way out, you see the pathway out, you see the clarity, you see the road ahead of you isn't as scary and dark and sad, you start to see how life worked, especially when I'm just telling you, if anybody is in a dark place, write a goddamn book. write your life story down, even if you never share it with another person. If you can go back and see how it all connects, it just helps you work through those things. But what I realized, the thing that I was angry about, well, yes, it was losing my brother. Turns out it was because I'd lost my purpose. Like I didn't know who I was. When Andy was alive, I knew every day who I was. I was his brother, and I protected him. And my mom needed me to. She worked 3 jobs. We were living in public housing, and we didn't have money. And it wasn't until my mom met my stepdad that we had some stability. And even then it was awkward because we were having issues with my biological father, and he wasn't around, and we wanted him around, and he didn't want to be around. And Andy had the same problems as I did with that. And we have a new guy coming in who's 12 years younger than my mom, and he's a disciplinarian and changing things up. And so that was an area of our life that we didn't necessarily jive with. But I knew my purpose was to protect Andy. And when he died, I didn't know this, but I lost my purpose. And I was trying to fulfill that purpose with serving in the military, with serving as a police officer, with protecting people, with mentoring kids, with whatever I was doing for those 13 years. I was trying to find something that made me feel like I meant something. And I wasn't getting it. It wasn't there. It didn't happen. And when Andy died and I dealt with it after those 13 years, I realized that my purpose was renewed when I was able to put those words into that book. And that book was my healing. And that book allowed me to realize that I could take my brother's life and the amazing things that he had accomplished, which I had no knowledge of, and the person that he had become and the lives that he had touched and the way that he did it, I could then go out and share that with the world. And what that allowed me to do mentally was refocus. And when I'm focused, I'm really dangerous. When I am locked in, I'm very good at whatever it is I'm locked in on. And it allowed me to feel myself worth again. And it allowed me to have all that. And what that did for me as a husband and a father and a son, it allowed me to show them who I really am. It allowed me to share that with them. I hadn't been able to share that passion, that joy, that purpose, that drive that meant something, that had value, that was a purpose higher than me, that wasn't just going in and putting in my 9 to 5 and coming home and bringing in the paycheck and buying groceries and going on a vacation. It wasn't just that. It was, they could see me at my very best. And that allowed me to believe in myself again, and allowed me to be able to share my love inside of me again. And Lauren and I have been so much better since 2002. And I pray to God every day that she never stops loving me, because I don't know how I would react if she stopped believing in me. And that's one thing that I always told her. I said, through everything, I promised you I would never fail you. I said, I will not fail. I said, I will never fail you. I may not be as good as I should be, and I may not have been able to connect the way I should have connected, but I will never fail you. And she's never lost faith in that. And I want my kids every day to know what excellence looks like, what hard work looks like, what love and caring and drive and protection and loyalty and commitment looks like. And I tell them every day that I love them. I tell them every day how proud I am of them. I tell them every day how much their Uncle Andy would love them. And I tell them, I wrote that book so they could know him. They could get to know the person that 30 years later can still create this emotion inside of me, and why he was so important in my life. And I think they know him. And I think that was not why I wrote the book, but it was a great byproduct that my wife and kids know. Doesn't excuse how I was for 13 years, but now they know why. And I can't change it. I can't fix it. I can't outlove it to make it not what it was. But I can spend every day trying to figure out how to ensure it never happens again. So when people ask me what is, how has my brother's death impacted my life with my family, they went through the darkest period with me without knowing they were going through it. Just knowing that they didn't know differently who I was. There was no change. That's who my wife met, and that's how she married me, and that's why my daughter knew me when she was born. But now that they know who I really am, they can see the difference, and they know how much I love them and how hard I work to ensure that they know what that looks like, and how effort means something, and loyalty and commitment and all those things that are important to me. They understand it, and they understand that there are other people in my life that benefit from that too, and that I share a lot of responsibility within me to other people, and they allow me to be shared. And that is one of the greatest gifts that they give me, because they could be very selfish and ask for me to be all in with them all the time, but they know that I have to be all in with other people too, and they allow me that luxury of being able to go out and do that. And that's one of the greatest gifts my family's ever given me.
I'm struck by the power, of the reality of grace in your life, to be able to find peace and comfort and kind of really being able to revel in Andy's legacy, to have that, that's grace in action, that right there, to be able to have that gift, and move forward, to be able to heal relationships at home. In some way, what you do every day hasn't changed, but it's what's driving you, and, what's driving you now is coming from a place of, a mission, a purpose, that's so much bigger than a paycheck, that's so much bigger than personal. I love being around you because you don't care about things. There's so many people in this world that are just caught up in what what they have. And when you talk about who. You talk about the who, Matt. You talk about people. You talk about relationships. You talk about your kids. You talk about your wife. If you have material goals, I don't know what they are. Maybe I need to ask different questions. And hey, there's the basics, right? But what I hear in you is a desire to take what's been a life of service and really elevate it. And when we met that first night, what was really clear with me is that you were ready to make some big changes. And not because you were unhappy with life, but because you were feeling called to do more and to serve more. That's the message I got. Can you talk about, so I think there's, I think for anybody listening, I think there's a lot to reflect on. If you're listening tonight, for us to take a look and say, hey, where do I need to lean in for where maybe there can be some healing? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to forgive? What do I need to forgive in myself? This is a journey you've been on over time. What do I need to let go of? What do I need to do less of? What do I need to do more of? What everybody's asked to ask those questions, but something inside of you, when I look at the resume, if you were to look at the resume, it's kind of like, hey, why don't you retire? You've lived 4 or 5 different lives inside of one lifetime, but you're driven to take on a whole new world. I don't know if you knew how to spell podcast last year at this time. I don't even know.
No idea what one was.
I didn't even know if you knew what it was, or how it worked. I think it's fascinating that you're totally not conventional. You're not following any of the conventional ways. You're not against any conventional ways. Nothing, no judgment there. You're just blazing your own path, and you're getting people interested in what you're doing. I think it's because the story is so powerful. Sue wrote, what an inspiration you are. We need more people like you in this world. And she's proud to say you're his friend. Joe said, I saw you speak in person. Your passion is contagious, So I think what's fascinating is there are a lot of people who know you. You know a lot of people. But the world's about to get to know you. And what I remember thinking when I left meeting you that night, a little over a year ago, is the world needs more people like that. And it'd be easy to be content. Can you talk about what's driving? I mean, you've spoken for free 1,000 times, schools, assemblies, you've mentored people. If you were charging $1 an hour for all of the free work that you've done, you might be a millionaire. And what I mean by that is that's all that work is there. And so it's a little bit of a weird thing to say, well, hey, I'm going to take it to the next level. I'm going to focus on a change in vocation so I can serve more. Can you help people understand that doesn't come from ego, but that comes from this desire to serve more and what that looks like? Can you talk a little bit about, people say, wow, you got a kind of a big shot now. You got a podcast. You got all these famous people on here. But if anybody knows, knows that that's not what's going on. So talk about 2 dates and a dash. Talk about what you're excited about right now, having been on this journey, and talk about the next couple years or the next couple months or the next couple weeks. What are you excited about?
Well, one thing I have always been, I will always outwork everybody. That's always been my motto. No one will ever outwork me. If it's a matter of hours in a day and effort put in those hours, I will find a way to maximize it and get the most out of it. And that worked in a lot of my areas of professions in the past. I realized in this profession, in the speaking profession, in the podcast profession, being out more in the public, sharing profession, that's not the case. And it took me a while to figure it out, and many talks with you. But what I realized is I need to keep doing the things I'm doing. I need to go out and continue to mentor kids and try to influence people in a positive way and share my brother's story and share the inspiration that I get from that and the passion and the joy that comes from that and try to help people through that story. And then the podcast was just another way for me to continue to build that ability to allow people to not only, so I'm doing that through my speaking, but then I can also allow people to do that through the show. So 2 dates and a dash is your life's made up of 2 dates and a dash. The day you're dying, the dash is what you live in between, and it matters. And I want to highlight people that are truly living their dash. And it doesn't matter if they're an athlete or a business person or an everyday Joe who's just living his a great life and helping people and inspiring people. I realize that those 2 things I'm doing, the speaking and the podcast, once I stopped forcing the rock up the hill and trying to outwork everybody, and I allowed God to just say, go ahead, do what you got to do. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Don't set a timetable. I had so many dates that I was going to be done this by or attain this by and do this by, and they kept coming and passing. And I kept asking myself, why? What am I doing wrong? Am I not working hard enough? I'm not putting enough hours in. Am I not, whatever? And I realized it had nothing to do with that. I had to let go of that feeling that I could control the outcome. The only thing I can control is me. And the only thing I control is my passion and the joy and the love that I share when I'm mentoring a kid or speaking in front of a business. And the podcast was the same thing. I just wanted it to breathe. That's why I don't have a plan when I do it. I don't want to be structured with it. I want to just let one question lead to the flow of the conversation and allow people to shine naturally without having some dictated path. So it's all part of this letting go process of the control freak that I am, and knowing that I can do this without being in control, and that allowing God to do his work in me. And then I can't tell you how many opportunities have come since I did that. And they may have already been there and I just didn't see them because I was working so damn hard and didn't pay attention. I think the thing that I'm most excited about, 2 things. Number one, I love the challenge of something new. I love solving complex problems, but I also love knowing that my brother has never once failed me since I allowed him back into my heart and the world back into my heart. That every time that I needed him to sort of just soothe my brain. And I tell the story when I ran across New Jersey in 2008 and I had broken bones in my feet and I had a seizure at mile 40, I would talk to my brother and I would go, please tell me this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I'm doing this to honor you. I'm trying to raise money for kids with disabilities. Please tell me that this is going to work, because I don't know if I can make it 78 miles with my body broken. Like, how do I do this? And somehow every time that I had to go run, he gave me the strength to go do that. But I would talk to him the whole time. And I still do. I talk to my brother every day. And I know in my heart that everything I've done in my life, from being a military man to being a cop to being an air marshal to being a bodyguard to working with Tim Tebow, who taught me more about life when I finally got a chance to reflect on everything I learned from him and how he lives his life. I learned so much from him. All these things that I've done in my life are leading me to here. This moment in my life where I'm allowed to have access to the world and share a story, my purpose, which is to share my brother's story and inspire people to live their life, that dash, to the best of their ability. And when you wrote down on that napkin, I swear to God, it was like a divine providence. And you said, this is just me, it was like one of those, like, I'm just spitballing here. And you write, living a life of selfless service worthy of remembrance. And you said, I don't know what that's going to mean, but at some point in time, I think that's what you're doing. That's what I'm hearing. And that's it. And I tell people all the time, I don't ever want anyone to come to my funeral and sit in a pew and think to themselves, who the hell was Matt Cubbler and why are all these people here? I don't want anyone to not know my story, the whole story, every ounce of it. I don't want to ever think that someone didn't know me the way that someone else knew me. I want to be as open with everybody as I possibly can and share me and my life and everything that's happened with them. I want to be remembered for the work that I did in other people's lives, because that's what my brother did, and I didn't pay attention to see it. And that's if I have a regret in the world, it's that I didn't see it when it was happening. But the best blessing I ever got was now I do. And I think that's what I want. When somebody says, what's the end game? That's my end game. I don't care about money. I don't care about cars. I don't care about vacations. I don't give a shit about passive income or any of that other nonsense. If I get rich, I get rich. If I stay poor, I stay poor. I don't give a shit. But at the end of the day, I just want to impact lives in such a profound way that when I die, there's a room full of people that are all willing to stand up and say, Matt Cubbler was a good man. That's it. It's the only thing I care about. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I'll just make the comment that the thing I'm certain of is that the ripple effect of your journey has already impacted thousands of people. You know, there's an exercise where we have people, when we bring some people in and we do some personal development, we ask people to write down essentially who's kind of front and center in their life, you know, who's in, you know, to coin a phrase from my friend John, who's in the front row of your life. And we ask people to write down who are the 6 to 8 people, you're 5, and we have people consider who's in their circle. But we rarely flip it on its head and say, if the world were to sit down and write out, if everybody else were to write who's in their circle, how many people's circle would you show up in? And the fact is, Matt, there are kids that you've mentored, spoken to, there's lives that you've touched of people that have come and gone, and you may not even remember them, but because of who you are and where you've been, you've had an impact. And I think the message that I think that is so fitting for people listening tonight is to know that there's nothing that's unimportant. You know, the interaction with the cashier, the person you meet for the first time, that there's nothing that doesn't matter. And it would have been easy for someone to think that with the challenges Andy had, it would have been easy for someone to draw a conclusion early on that, wow, you know, Andy probably isn't going to be that successful, and maybe he's not going to be that well received, and he's going to have, with all of his challenges, how's it going to be? I love the story of him playing basketball at the camp and what happened there. Can you share that story? It's just such a great story. And, you know, I have till like 1 a.m., so you can tell me when we're done. But
we got about 5 minutes. I don't want to go too long because then I won't be able to make it onto my syndicated radio slot that I have on Wildfire Radio.
Can you tell the basketball story real quick? Tell it in 30 seconds. If you
the one after he passed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about my brother was not a coordinated athlete, but he could run like the wind and he could shoot a jump shot like it was no tomorrow. He could stand anywhere on the court and drain a jump shot. And the only thing he loved in life was basketball. And he would play every day. There's a black guy maintenance at the camp named Otis, who he and Andy would play one-on-one until the sun went down after work. And Andy was always playing basketball. Anybody needed to find Andy if he wasn't working, he was playing basketball. And when Andy died,
sorry.
all the staffers at Camp Nava played one last game of basketball in Andy's honor, which is ultimately why they built Andy's court on the campgrounds, named it after him. So now anybody that goes to that camp, when they walk through the doors above it says Andy's court.
So it's safe to say that unless you have a stadium named after you, Andy's always going to be way more famous than you.
Way more.
No matter what you do. And I think that's the beautiful part about this. There really is no way you're going to outshine him because it's his light that shines in you. And I think we all have people in our life that live through us, live in us, and honoring that legacy and using it to drive us and inform the way we want to live is a powerful lesson. I think that's one of the great lessons of your life. I think it's what it's all the fuel you need to do, whatever God has in store with you. You've got it. And it's got to be kind of powerful knowing in this life that you're playing with house money. There's nothing else to win. There's nothing to lose. But what you do every day matters. And I think that's a powerful thing that you're sharing with the world. And that's one of the reasons that I, among so many other people, are so excited to support you and love you on your mission here. And it's been an honor to be here tonight. We could have talked for many more hours. There are many stories, but I hope we get to do this again someday.
We will.
Matt, thank you for sharing, being open. Your vulnerability gives people the opportunity to take a look inside at places that they may not want to go. And that's when we really start living. God bless you.
Brother, I am so thankful that you did this for me. I hope it was as well received as I intended it to be. I hope people get a little bit of a better glimpse into who I am. I do put forth a tough exterior a lot. And we've talked about it. I have a side that I can more than easily access that isn't necessarily the warm, cuddly side, but I prefer to be in this mode because this is true to who I want the world to see. And that part of me where I had to be that other person for many different reasons, I always will hold on to it because I think I need that as part of my identity. But I think this is the person that the world needs to know a little bit better. And I appreciate you being the one that did this for me. And don't go anywhere. We're going to stay on once I close the show. But everybody, thank you. I hope you get me. I hope you understand why I do what I do and where I'm coming from and where I want to go and what my motivations are and my inspiration is. And I think it's important to reflect on your life. I think it's important to know where you've been and where you want to go and how those two things connect. And having people in your life, like I do with John and many other people, is vital to that. And find your five, figure out who they are, let them know they're in it, and that they're the ones that you're going to call when shit goes sideways and you need help. And it's good to know that when that call comes, the answer is going to be yes. So with that being said, thank you for watching this episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash. I am your host, Matt Cubbler. Thank you to my guest host and good friend, John Kane, for interviewing me tonight. And I'm very thankful that I got a chance to do this now that it's done, because I was scared shitless in the beginning, but I'm thankful it's done. And I appreciate everybody watching. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.